The type of skill acquisition that most of us do most often throughout our entire lifespan is figure out how to do something new for the first time.
Like DJing for me.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do I do that then? You talk about these 10 major principles of rapid skill acquisition.
Sure.
Where I can learn anything in 20 hours. What are the most important elements of this that I need to know about if I'm someone who maybe, less in the context of business, has never started a business in my life, has never run one before, but I do want to learn how to do it?
Yeah. The best way to approach this is there's a set of 5 recommendations that go in order. And the first is like deciding exactly what it is that you're trying to do. So in my experience, like a lot of people, when they, at the beginning of the process of learning how to do something, the goal is way too big, like it's way too much, way too soon. Whereas something specific, concrete, and approachable is a way better place to start. So DJing an entire set at a crazy music festival is not the place to set the goal right at the very beginning. It's, I want to do my first song for myself.
For me, it was like, I want to mix that song into that song without it sounding shit.
Totally, exactly. And that's a great place to start, because then it's like, okay, this is a concrete, specific thing. I know exactly what it looks like. You probably had some experience listening to music of this type, knowing when things go well and when they don't go well. So you had a little bit of like taste, context, perspective. And so deciding like, okay, my early goal is to do this one specific thing. It's the first failure mode because most people don't decide on that concrete specific thing. It's way too nebulous. There's not enough to work with. So deciding is the first part. From there, most of the things that we talk about as skills aren't single skills. They're actually bundles of smaller sub-skills that are all important and you use in combination. And so I'm not familiar with DJing, so you can fill in the blanks for me. But like, what were some of the smaller things that you needed to learn how to do as a thing to be able to like mix one song into another?
Well, you need to know music, because music has different, I'm really going to butcher it, so DJs are literally going to laugh at me in their WhatsApp groups, but different beats per minute.
Sure.
So every song has a different beat per minute. So you need to learn about the different beats per minute so you can merge them. Every song has a different key. I think that's kind of what they call it, a key. So you have like an A, a B, a C, and you need to know that, because before you even get to mixing them in, that's quite important. So that's the music side of thing. Then there's the hardware itself, which is knowing how you see two songs coming at the same time. So you need to learn about the hardware before you can mix two songs together. And then, actually, interestingly, in the first hour of lessons, I was expecting to jump on the decks, but the first hour of lessons that I had was all about what is music.
Totally.
It was like, and how does music sound good in this kind of like 8-bar thing that music goes in. So it was all about music itself. I had to start over there, whereas I was expecting to jump on the decks.
Yes. That is a brilliant example of deconstruction. It's exactly what we're talking about. So the skill is not DJing itself. It's learning about keys, learning about tempo, learning about transitions, learning about all of these smaller things that you need to use in concert in order to use them together to do this more complex thing that you want to do. So a good teacher, like the value of a good teacher is they can help you with that deconstruction. Like, what are all the little subcomponents that I need? And then the next layer down from that is, once you've deconstructed into the smaller parts, that's when you start to do some research of which of these parts are more important or less important. What should I focus on first? What can wait until later? And so like tempo and musical keys might be really important. And so it might make sense to start the process there. Let's get that really solid. We can wait for the hardware. We can wait for the plugins. We can wait for, all of these things that comes later. Get this stuff down solid first.
Nobody wants to wait.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
That's the thing. Like, I think there's an element to which that's true. there's also an element to waiting here, going about it in a little bit more of a deliberate fashion is what gives us an advantage as adult learners. Like we can approach what we're doing in a strategic way. We can focus our time and attention on the things that are going to have the highest rewards first. And so just a little bit of impulse control of like, I'm going to hold off on the buttons for a couple hours to learn a little bit of this first. Like that's where you start figuring out the inflection points in the skill. Like the things that if you can just wrap your head around this, you can get a huge improvement in a very short period of time. And then the trick on the research phase, and this is the one that I struggle with a lot because I like research. It's fun for me. I can get stuck here. And so the trick is to do just enough research to give yourself context, understanding what you're looking for, an idea of what it looks like to do well or to not do well. And from there, you do just enough to know a little bit of what you're doing, and then you actually start the focused, deliberate practice component, because that's where the skill's actually built. The skill's not built in research.
A lot of people seem to get stuck on that research part because they are, that people call them in culture procrastinators. But I had a conversation with Nir Ayal, and he said we're discomfort avoiding creatures. And he said whenever you find yourself procrastinating, it's basically because there's discomfort associated with the task at hand.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation with someone very close to me recently, actually yesterday. And in our conversation, they've been meaning to do this online project for a long, long time, for 2 years now. And they've just done everything but this online project. And when we kind of deconstructed it, as you said, it was really because they don't feel competent in several of the individual pieces. So they're just like researching themselves to death and taking no action.
Absolutely. This is one of the biggest barriers to learning as an adult. Adult learners hate to feel stupid. We hate to feel over our head that we don't know what we're doing, that we're going to look bad in front of others, that there's some idealized skill level that would represent success and your early attempts look nothing like that. There was an interesting study that was done about changes in artistic ability and inclination over the human lifespan. And so when you ask a bunch of young children, are you an artist? Every one of them answers yes. Yeah, I create art. That's what I do. And there's a certain threshold, and it usually happens around like the middle grades, junior high-ish, where people will start to say like, no, it's not something that I do. And there's a certain amount of self-consciousness that develops in the process of becoming an adult where you can start to recognize that the difference between what you can do and what you want to do can be somewhat extreme.
Yeah.
And that self-consciousness can be an active barrier to getting started in the first place.
It's all by comparison as well, isn't it? Really, because
like comparison with other people, and then also comparison with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So with other people, like early stages of skill acquisition, if you're comparing yourself to the masters in hours 1, 2, and 3, you are not doing yourself any favors at all. And then even like, I think that's a little bit easier to avoid because I have only golfed a couple times in my life. Comparing myself to Tiger Woods doesn't feel like an even like conceptually appropriate thing for me to do. That's not difficult. The harder thing is comparing yourself to the other person who has not golfed very much, but somehow hit a shot straight or whatever. Or like, it feels like this shouldn't be so hard for me. Why is this so hard for me? And then like the self-recrimination feedback loop starts. And so I talk about in the first 20 hours, I call this the frustration barrier. And so generally speaking, rough rule of thumb, hours 1 to 10 are brutal, emotionally speaking. And so that's the period of time where you're really frustrated. Things make very little sense. You're like, I don't know what a key is, let alone a key change. What's a beat per minute? And like all of those self-consciousness circuits are fully online, fully firing. And no matter how much you want something, those first few hours can be pretty brutal.
It's where most people quit as well, I guess.
Yes, and that's why. Like it's an emotional management problem. And so the way to get around that, also the way to get out of research mode and into doing mode, and this is where the title, The First 20 Hours, comes from. The first 20 hours refers to a pre-commitment, which is a very useful piece of behavioral psychology that says that if you pre-commit to taking a certain action, either a certain amount of times or within a certain period of time, either to yourselves or ideally to other people, you're far more likely to actually follow through on the doing of the thing. And so what I found is that in learning a new skill, making a pre-commitment that no matter what, I'm going to spend 20 hours doing this thing. I might be terrible. This might be really uncomfortable. I might hate it. I might never do this again. But no matter what, I care about this thing that I want to learn enough that I'm going to invest at least 20 hours of my life figuring out if this is good, if this works for me, if this is beneficial.